Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. This is episode 352, and we're going to talk about casting your fly rod such that you get a little bit more accuracy and a little bit more distance. Now, every casting podcast that I've ever cast in the last 350 plus episodes, I've made sure to communicate this simple truth. It is good to hear someone describe ways to cast better, but it's always best to actually be with somebody as they show you how to cast better. So, as I say with virtually everything I talk about on the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast, take what I say and use it as the impetus for the springboard into actually getting out there and making it happen a little bit more. A great progression would be to listen to a concept that I talk about, weigh it, let it roll around in your mind a little bit, maybe go out there and give it a shot yourself, but then probably get onto YouTube and see how somebody else is doing it. And if it's something where you say, this is either what I perceive to be like the key to much better casting for me, or if I really am struggling with this, then book an hour with a casting instructor. In the grand scheme of things, that's a good hour's worth of money well spent. It's not terribly expensive, and you can usually find somebody at a local fly shop. You can find like guides that will do it, and it's money that is well spent. It's kind of like when you go fishing with a guide and you're like, oh my goodness, $600, and what am I doing? Catching maybe a dozen fish, maybe 20 fish if I have a great day. Maybe I won't even catch a ton of fish, but you're picking up a lot of skills, a lot of water reading abilities, and a lot of kind of awareness that you wouldn't otherwise get if you just went out there and did it yourself. I say that fly casting is the same way, and that's having been the recipient of casting instruction early on, and then given casting instruction for a period of my life, and then actually receiving casting instruction and tune-ups as I have continued to be someone who teaches. So kind of that continuing education, because we all can have refinements and improvements to our fly casting. So all that to say that I'm going to talk about a few things as far as accuracy and distance that will hopefully just kind of trigger something in your head to maybe go out there and tweak your cast, or to seek out more instruction as you are looking to just get your fly where it needs to be for better opportunities at fish. So the first thing that I really want to mention today has to do with planes. Not airplanes, but the plane in which your rod hand travels. So something that I've talked about before on the podcast, and something that is inevitable anytime you read about or listen to anyone showing you something about the fundamentals of fly casting, specifically as it comes to kind of like reining in your cast so that you can begin to work on it, is what plane is your rod hand moving in? So, you might want to know why when you get like formal casting instruction, or you read a book that talks about fly casting, why is it so important to keep that elbow in tight? When I'm out on the river, I'm kind of free flowing and doing whatever and just kind of making those casts. Well, that's all fine and good. However, when you are learning how to cast, it's really important to keep the elbow in tight, because what that does is that effectively limits your range of motion with your rod hand. So, if you were to pin your right elbow against your side, and I never recommend that. You don't want that kind of constriction in your movement. But notice how your range of motion with your elbow up to your wrist and to your hand is very much limited. Compared to if you have that arm all the way out there, think of all the places you can go with your hand if you have your elbow extended. You have effectively 360-degree range of motion in a couple of different planes. But if your elbow is pinned up against your side, it really can only go up and down. It can go vertically down towards your knee and up towards your shoulder. And then side to side, it's really limited to like 180 degrees or less, depending on your mobility. So this is the first thing that I like to talk to people about when we cast, is that the less your rod hand moves side to side, the more you keep it in one plane. Or another way to think about it would be, if that two-dimensional plane is relatively thin. So I know that's a bit of an oxymoron to talk about thin and thick two-dimensional planes, but basically if that plane in which your hand moves back and forth as you're making your forward cast and your back cast, if that is a limited space where you move side to side horizontally within a few inches as opposed to a foot, and if you have your elbow out to the side, think about where your hand goes. So if you go through your casting motion with your arm cocked out at a 90-degree angle, which you see people do, and again, if you're making short casts and you're experienced and you can do this, but if you cock your right elbow out at 90 degrees from your body, and then you go through the motion of a fly cast, there's a very good chance that you're going from a forward position with your hand more aligned to the center of your body to a backward position with it really almost sticking out directly to your side. So we're talking about almost a 90-degree angle shift. So now what that looks like is that plane that your rod hand is moving in, and as a result, the butt of your fly rod is moving in, is not a two-dimensional plane at all. It is more like a box where it is moving from directly in front of your body all the way up to your side. And that does a few things. Well, one of those things is that there's a very good chance that you are rotating your fly rod. That is to say, if you picture your reel as kind of like a compass, it is going from east to north. Your reel is completely shifting 90 degrees. Now that might be hyperbole, that might be an exaggeration, but what that does is now you're not just casting that rod back and forward, you're also kind of pivoting that rod and you're causing it to sweep, and then you're going to have to bring it back around. So your rod is moving in not necessarily the right kind of parabola, but it's creating a wide arc. But it's not just that. As you are well aware, what you do with a 9-foot long rod with the butt end of it where your hand is on your handle is going to telegraph to a much greater degree 9 feet up that fly rod. So if your rod hand moves a foot, then your rod tip is probably moving something like 5 or 6 feet. Again, the math can vary based upon your rod length and about how much you are actually moving, but it's going to exaggerate that. So that's going to happen automatically, and that is how you can really cast really, really well with a good fly rod and only a little bit of motion. But it also means that if you add unnecessary motion into it, and the two things that I really highlight here, hopefully, are if you are moving that rod both kind of side to side such that you are pivoting it. So again, your reel is going from, instead of being, facing north, if you're looking at the head of the compass, your reel is going from north to east. It's rotating out 90 degrees. Now that's pivoting that whole fly rod, but then also you're swinging it out. And so now your cast is moving in a big arc. So that's the first thing that I like to kind of communicate to people as they want to get more accuracy and more distance. What plane is your rod moving in? Now, I am not one of those strict people. In fact, I got a lot of heat, and I don't say I was dismissed from a work group, but my my input was significantly diminished because I'm not dogmatic about fly casting. Like, once you get the fundamentals, then go and knock yourself out. You look at batters in Major League Baseball and the diversity of batting stances that they have, where their feet are, how their feet are aligned according to the batter's box, how much they are bending over, not just at the knees, but kind of crouched at the hips, where they are holding their bat as they await the pitch, if they're moving the bat or not. There's a significant amount of diversity within a relatively reasonable set of parameters. I think the same thing is true with fly casting. And no one's making millions of dollars of fly casting, so have at it. But there are some principles that can kind of steer you back in the direction of getting your cast in line. So one of the ways I like to think about it is, okay, let's look at your cast. All right, you're casting like you are on the water, and you may be a little bit loose and freeform. Okay, now pull that elbow in, and make sure that you keep that wrist relatively set so that your rod and reel are not pivoting, for right-handed caster, pivoting off to the right, left-handed caster pivoting off to the left, and let's watch what you do. Let's watch your mechanics. And once you start to kind of get that a little bit more set, now we can work on some of the other things that can maybe improve your distance and accuracy, or things that you can eliminate if they are detrimental to your distance and your accuracy. So that's the first thing. So that's something you can see yourself do easily. Just get into a casting motion, and then whether it's with a mirror, which actually is in some ways ideal as opposed to turning your head, because inevitably where you turn your head is going to influence your casting stroke. Your hips and your head are going to oftentimes be significant contributors to the nature of your fly cast. It's, again, another sports analogy. When you're training someone to tackle, you want them to be face on who they are going to tackle. You want their hips to be straight on there as well, because your body is going to be oriented that way as you move in that direction. And so anything time you shift a little bit sideways, you're going to lose some of that momentum, and everything else is just kind of follow in the wrong direction. So I actually have encouraged people to set up iPhones, to set up mirrors, to have somebody else just take a picture, so that you can kind of get a picture of what your cast looks like without you having to necessarily turn your head significantly. And one of the things, like I said, that I would pay attention to is where's my elbow and what am I doing with my wrist? So that's the first thing. Talking about planes, the plane of your rod arm moving kind of up and down as you make that cast, and then your hand. Is it moving side to side, causing that reel to kick out to the outside of your body or not? So that's the first thing that I will talk about when it comes to assessing your cast and maybe improving distance and accuracy. And really, what does that mean? Is it just for aesthetics? Is it just for being pretty? Well, what that does is two things. Really, the horizontal plane, the vertical plane of you having your elbow in closer, what that does is it limits kind of the arc in which your line has to travel. So you want that beautiful figure eight. You want those nice tight loops that are being created and then unwinding as you make that cast. Well, they're based on energy. The energy transfer from your body into that graphite, bamboo, fiberglass fly rod. They're transferring that energy into these nice tight loops, and not so fast that it's snapping, not so fast that it is closing in on itself, but fast enough that it is creating that nice loop, generating that energy, and that's where you can have, after one or two false casts, if you know how to haul, which I'll talk about here in a second, that's where you can bomb out 90 feet of fly line with one or two false casts, because you are generating enough line speed and there's enough power in that fly rod, in that cast, and that's often done with compact, deliberate motions that are carried out in a relatively limited plane of movement, okay? So concise, tight, powerful actions made in a deliberate way, carried out in a relatively confined plane of movement. So that it's all about line speed and keeping that line in kind of one place with the vertical plane of your elbow, and then the horizontal plane of your wrist effectively does the same thing. It's now that figure eight's not falling on its side while it's also trying to move back and forth vertically, and so you don't want that to fall apart. So that's really an accuracy one if you let your reel cock out to the right, so it's the spool of your reel is now facing to your right as opposed to in front of you and behind you. You'll lose accuracy. Distance is going to be the thing that is compromised if you have that really wide plane because your elbow is kind of flopping off to the side. So those are kind of two things in one, but it really has to do with just being conscientious of the planes in which your casting motion travels down at your body. So that's kind of 2-in-1 to start. The second one is really easy, and I think this is one of the underappreciated accuracy and distance aspects of the fly cast, and that is your leader and tippet. Your leader and tippet. So I don't know about you, but more often than not, my casts are not bad by 10 feet. So my casts aren't missing the mark by 10 feet, 15 feet, 20 feet. If I say I should be able to cast to that spot, or I should be able to cast upstream of that rising fish, I'm not missing that by 10 or 15 or 20 feet. I know my limitations based upon the rod weight that I'm using, the fly that I have on, river conditions, all that sort of stuff. And I know effectively where I can make that cast, and so I'm not missing big. Usually, when I miss small. So I'm missing by like 5 feet and under. And that's not to toot my own horn. I think we all get ourselves in that situation. We all know that if we're not casting 90 feet on a bonefish flat, that we're not disappointed in ourselves when we only cast 45 feet. Like we just know that's something that we can't do. But if we know we should be able to cast 30 feet to a rising trout, and we miss or we make a bad cast, it's usually only a couple feet that we're missing on. And there are ways around that by learning how to cast it a little bit with a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more dexterity in your cast and adaptability. But one of the things that can be done very, very simply is modifying your leader and tippet. Because again, leader and tippet does a few things. One, you need it because you can't tie a fly in your fly line, right? Secondly, it helps with your drift because your drift of your fly, whether it be a dry fly, whether it be a nymph, or whether it be a streamer fished in certain ways, is going to either be helped or hurt by the type of leader and tippet setup that you have. But the cast is the exact same way. That's why we use tapered leaders. If it was all about presentation, and you were fishing dry flies, then you would just run a loop at the end of a 10-foot section of 6X, and then you would loop that onto your fly line, and you would throw a fly on the other end, and you'd be good to go. But we don't do that. Whether we use a knotless tapered leader, or we use a homemade leader, a leader that's built, or we use like a furled leader or something like that, we are looking at a taper from that thick fly line down to that thin tippet where it can be attached to the fly, whether we're using something like a 2-aught deceiver or we're using a size 24 midge. And so that has to, by necessity, impact your fly cast. So a couple things that you can do here. One, I would say just get familiar with leaders, leader formulas, and tippet lengths. And just be aware that if your leader is collapsing, it may be because there's not enough butt section. So what I mean by that is that you're going from your fly line to this maybe knotless tapered leader that you've trimmed back, and so you've got only a short chunk of butt section, and then maybe a little bit of like 2X and 3X, and then a really long section of 4X or 5X. And it's just too supple, too limber. There's not enough weight and diameter of that monofilament or that fluorocarbon to effectively turn over, especially lighter, smaller flies. The same is true if you have a very wind-resistant fly. You have a popper. You have a streamer with a cone head. If your leader is too light, then it's that fly is going to influence your cast a lot more than your leader is as you unfurl that cast. And so if you're missing, and missing can mean a few things. One, that leader and tippet could be piling up well short of your intended destination. And so what happens is I'll just make a longer cast. Well, now it's piling up on top of where you want that to be. And there are some casts that do employ a piled tippet, but hopefully you're doing it on purpose, not because it's the only thing you can do, or because that's it's actually just falling short. So you're just compensating by casting a little further. It could be doing that. It could be piling up. Your tippet and leader is landing in one spot. Or it could be that larger fly, and by larger fly, I mean even like a size 14 beadhead nymph, it's splashing down, or that streamer is splashing down. It's actually turning over on that last presentation cast, your leader, tippet, and fly so quickly that it's hitting with the splash. That can also happen with a dry fly, and now you've ruined your delicate presentation. It's great if you're fishing a hopper, but again, things that are done intentionally and things that are done unintentionally, if they look exactly the same and you're not trying to do them the same, it's because of a lapse or a lack of technique. So the second thing when it comes to accuracy and distance is maybe change up your leader formula. If you are constantly missing that spot by like 3 or 4 feet, maybe dial back on the length of your tippet, or maybe, instead of having a 6 foot section of 5x at the end of your leader for kind of the presentation of your fly, then maybe do a 3 foot section of 4x and a 3 foot section of 5x. Maybe a little bit more weight, a little bit more of a gradual energy transfer in your leader will cause that tippet to turn over. Yes, it is often easier to just throw a long length of one diameter of tippet on the end of your leader, but that might not be the best thing for your cast. That's why tippets are and are sold in every shape and size, even down to you can get the half X tippets. I think that's a little overkill for most situations, but you can really dial in a great energy transfer from your cast to your line to your leader to your tippet to your fly if you adjust things ever so slightly. That it does make a difference. All right. So that's 20 minutes with really talking about 3 things, but thinking about your plane, your horizontal plane of how your wrist may be cocking off to the side. And again, that's just by nature. We do that. You think about going to pull a punch, and unless you're a trained boxer, there's a very good chance that you're going to pivot that fist off to the side. So a lot of us are, we've swung a baseball bat or a tennis racket long before we've cast a fly rod. So that's just kind of in our heads. So that's something to think about. And then the vertical plane, are you causing that to wobble and get wide by moving that elbow? And if doing so, I didn't mention this before, but not only are you widening that arc of that fly line has to travel, but you're also losing power. You only have so much strength, and if you're moving in 2 directions at once, you are actually diminishing the amount of force that you are putting into that fly rod. And again, I don't want to sound dogmatic about fly casting because it certainly isn't that. But if you are interested in figuring out distance and accuracy issues, improving on those, this is a good place to start. And then secondly, leader and tippet. Leader and tippet formula is way more than just what length do I need to use to not spook fish, and what diameter do I need to use to get it into the eye of my hook. It's way more than that, and actually casting accuracy and distance really will come into place when you get that. And again, with the tippet and leader equation, it could be that lays out perfectly straight, or it could be that now it's tapered such that you have control of your leader and tippet in your cast. You can create those arcs by moving your rod off to the side. You can do those things that we were talking about earlier, can be detrimental to a cast when you implement them intentionally. So you cock your wrist or your elbow to either to the right, to the left, up or down at the presentation cast, and that will cause those little dog legs to the left, to the right, again, way beyond the scope of a podcast. But if your leader is balanced properly, that will allow that motion to communicate down your leader and into your tippet, into your fly. And you can do some really cool things, putting some slack into that leader and tippet, causing it to go out super tight so that it's instantly in that drift, dog-legging around a rock, popping underneath a branch, all sorts of cool things when you actually have that control of your leader and tippet. All right, so many more things that we could talk about, and we will. I'm sure there will be another podcast where we talk about these things, and there's certainly more resources on casting across, and there are an absolute abundance of resources that you can find online and as you talk to a certified casting instructor. Do you have a favorite tip for accuracy and or distance? Let me know. Matthew at castingacross.com. I would love to hear what you think. This week on Casting Across, Monday's article is called "The Fish in Artificial Intelligence." I really wrestled with that title. Do I want to put like artificial intelligence, but have like the word fish in the middle? Anyway, I talked about this a few weeks ago in the podcast where I talked about AI and fly fishing. So this is kind of the some different thoughts. That time I kind of used it for good. Here I talked about some of the good uses and some of the things that I think are detrimental. I have a lot more thoughts on this, but I try to keep it within a relatively short read. So the fish and artificial intelligence. Wednesday's article was another book review video, The Essential Read for New Fly Fishers. This is a 1-minute review video. It's called The Essential Read for New Fly Fishers, and it is about the book The Curtis Creek Manifesto, which is a lot of fun. It's a wonderful book for beginner. I would say it is essential. It's a great way to get people exposed to fly fishing. And like so many things I like to talk about on Casting Across, even if you've been fly fishing for a long time, it gives you a great perspective on the basics of fly fishing and does so in a fun, kind of tongue-in-cheek, super cool illustrated way. So definitely check out the Curtis Creek Manifesto and my video over at YouTube. This week's recommendation on the podcast is actually the Casting Across Fly Fishing YouTube channel. If you put Casting Across in, it'll pop up. You can find links on my website. And if you are not subscribed to receive Casting Across in your inbox, which you should, I only send out one email a week. It comes out on Tuesdays at 1 o'clock Eastern. And all it is you get a link to all 3 articles that came out. So for the last half year, it's been an article, a video, and a podcast. You just get a link to it and you see it, and you don't have to go searching around that crazy internet to find those things. But I would say if you are a listener to the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you are a reader of the website, subscribe to the YouTube channel because I really think that the book reviews are some good content. Anyway, let me know what you think about those. And there'll be a link, of course, to the YouTube videos and the show notes and this podcast page over at castingcross.com. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing podcast. Please subscribe to your favorite podcast app and rate the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.